Why does silence sometimes speak louder than 1,000 words? The air on the parade ground tasted of diesel and broken promises. Master Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma stood in the third rank motionless, a dark blue island in a sea of desert camouflage. She was small, precise, an anomaly among giants, and she knew it. The October sun beat down on forward operating base Sentinel with the kind of heat that made men forget themselves, that made them careless. But Anna Sharma never forgot, never became careless. Her Navy working uniform was crisp despite the dust that coated everything else. Her posture was perfect, not rigid, just, still, the kind of stillness that comes from years of holding your breath underwater, from waiting in the dark for a signal that may never come. General Marcus Thorne stood at the podium like a monument to himself, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, a jawline that belonged on a recruiting poster. His voice boomed through speakers that crackled in the dry air, each word amplified to match his ego. He spoke of valor, of sacrifice, of the indomitable American spirit, standard rhetoric, predictable modulation, high amplitude, low information density. Sharma listened to the cadence, not the words. She analyzed it the way she analyzed everything, like a signal waiting to be decoded. The awards ceremony began. Names were called. Soldiers marched forward with proud smiles, shook hands for the cameras, returned to their places with medals pinned to their chests, catching the harsh sunlight. Then the announcer called her name. Master Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma. She moved with an economy of motion that some mistook for hesitation. But there was no hesitation, only precision. She walked to the center mark, halted, executed a perfect salute, her small frame casting an even smaller shadow on the dusty ground. General Thorne looked down at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, disdain, both perhaps. He took the citation from his aide, the paper rustling in his large hands. Master Chief Petty Officer Sharma is awarded the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service. His voice had lost some of its booming warmth. The words came out flat, clinical, for providing critical signals intelligence support during Operation Serpent's Coil, leading to the successful neutralization of a high-value enemy network. Support, intelligence, passive words, secondary words, words that to a man like Marcus Thorne meant you were somewhere safe, somewhere far from the real fight. He looked from the paper to her, then to the assembled task force, to the embedded media pool, to the cameras. He saw something, an opportunity, a teachable moment, a chance to remind everyone what real warriors looked like. He put the citation down. "In my day," he began, his voice adopting that folksy, condescending tone that powerful men use when they want to sound relatable, support meant you were miles from the wire, safe and sound. It meant you were pushing paper while real soldiers were pushing the fight. A few chuckles rippled through the ranks, his acolytes, the ones who laughed at everything he said. Sharma's expression remained unchanged. Her eyes, dark and steady, fixed on the middle distance as protocol dictated. She could have been carved from stone or ice, something that doesn't bend, doesn't break. "This operation," Thorne declared, his voice rising like a preacher reaching the climax of his sermon, "was won by trigger pullers, by the infantrymen who kicked in the doors, by the men whose boots were on the ground." He picked up the velvet box containing her medal, opened it. The bronze star glinted in the sunlight, catching fire for just a moment. Then he snapped it shut. The air went still. Even the generators seemed to hold their breath. "We reserve these for the warriors at the tip of the spear," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl. "For the cameras. Always for the cameras." He unpinned the medal from its cushion and in a gesture of profound, calculated contempt, slipped it into the breast pocket of his own uniform. "We'll find a more appropriate recipient for this, someone who was actually in the fight." He looked directly at her, a challenge, an invitation to react, to protest, to cry or rage or do anything that would validate his dominance. That would prove he was right about women like her. He received nothing. Master Chief Sharma held her salute for one more perfect second. Then she dropped it cleanly, performed a flawless about-face, and walked off the parade ground. She did not look back. The sound of her footsteps on the gravel was the only noise in a suddenly vast and uncomfortable silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the rigid line of her back, the way she didn't stumble, didn't hesitate, just walked into the haze and disappeared. Some people thought she ran, that she fled in shame. They were wrong. Back in her temporary quarters, a windowless containerized housing unit she shared with a bank of humming servers, Anna Sharma did not rage. She did not weep. She sat at her small steel desk and powered on her hardened laptop. The machine booted without sound, its screen glowing in the dim light like a cold moon. She accessed the secure network, downloaded the official video feed from the ceremony. Her fingers moved with practiced speed across the keyboard, executing commands with the same precision she'd used for her salute. She isolated the relevant segment, from the moment her name was called to the moment she exited the frame, saved the high-definition clip to a triple-encrypted solid-state drive. Then she cross-referenced the media roster for the event, noted the names and affiliations of every journalist present, Associated Press, Reuters, Fox News, the New York Times, all witnesses, all documented. She opened a new file, a simple text document that served as her personal log. The cursor blinked on the empty screen, waiting. She typed, date October 23rd, time 14:37 Zulu, location Fob Sentinel Parade Ground, incident Public Awards Ceremony, presiding officer General M. Thorne, USA, event recipient of Bronze Star Medal, citation for Operation Serpent's Coil. General Thorne publicly questioned the validity of the award, citing a distinction between combat and support roles. He retained the physical medal. Official video and media witnesses documented the event. Action taken, withdrew from ceremony, filed this log. She saved the file. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. There was no emotion in the words, only facts, because facts were sufficient. The system she served was built on process and documentation. An emotional outburst was noise, easily dismissed, but a documented procedural breach. That was a signal, clear, persistent. It could be ignored for a time, but it would remain in the logs, waiting. With the report filed, she felt a familiar need, for pressure, for silence, for the kind of clarity that only comes when everything else falls away. She changed into a plain black swimsuit and walked across the base to the combat diver training facility, a deep cylindrical pool housed in a cavernous metal building. The water a cold, chlorinated blue, usually empty at this time of day. She stood at the edge, regulating her breath. In, hold, out. The air in the building was heavy with the scent of ozone and chlorine, chemical and clean. She executed a simple feet-first entry, slicing into the water with minimal splash. The cold was a welcome shock, a sensory reset. She sank to the bottom, 20 feet down, and settled in a cross-legged position on the smooth concrete floor. The world above vanished. The harsh sunlight, the dust, the noise of the base, the general's voice, all of it replaced by a deep, resonant silence broken only by the sound of her own controlled breathing. She began a breath-hold drill. The pressure of the water was a uniform, comforting weight on her entire body. Here there were no politics, no egos, no grandstanding generals. There were only the laws of physics, buoyancy, pressure, the body's demand for oxygen. She was not a support person. She was a weapons system whose primary components were pattern recognition and an absolute mastery of the electromagnetic spectrum. General Thorne saw a small woman who worked with computers. He could not comprehend a battlefield measured in hertz and decibels, where a victory could be won by isolating a single packet timing anomaly in a terabyte of meaningless static. He could not imagine a fight that took place in the invisible space between antennas. His failure of imagination was not her problem. It was, however, now a documented fact. She surfaced, her lungs burning, her mind clear. She repeated the descent, the ritual of pressure and release washing away the last vestiges of the public humiliation, because it was not an insult to her. It was a flaw in the general's understanding of modern warfare, and flaws in her world were liabilities to be exploited. What happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? 2 days passed. The base hummed with whispers. Everyone had seen what happened on the parade ground. Some thought the general was right, that desk jockeys didn't deserve combat awards. Others thought he'd gone too far. But no one spoke about it openly, not when a four-star general was involved. Master Chief Sharma went about her work as if nothing had happened. She arrived at her workspace at the same time every morning, left at the same time every evening, ran the same routes, swam at the same hours. Her routine was unbreakable, predictable only in its precision. But something was moving in the background, something she had set in motion with a few keystrokes and a simple log entry. Commander David Calloway, her direct superior officer, had received a priority message, not through official channels, through a back channel that very few people knew existed. The message was brief, stark. It contained a video file and a timestamp, and a single line of text. Verify against official after-action report. Discrepancy requires immediate attention. Calloway watched the video in his private quarters, watched General Thorne take the medal, watched Master Chief Sharma walk away. He sat in silence for a long time after the video ended. Then he opened the after-action report for Operation Serpent's Coil. The report credited aggressive patrolling by Alpha Company for locating the target, ground-level intelligence gathering, traditional infantry work, the kind of thing that made sense to people like General Thorne, the kind of thing that made for good press releases. But Calloway had been Sharma's commanding officer for 3 years. He knew what she was capable of, and he knew that Alpha Company hadn't found anything. They'd been sent to a specific location, given exact coordinates, told where to kick in the door. Someone had given them that location. He picked up his secure phone and made a call to someone whose rank was classified, whose office existed in no official directory. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Calloway sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. The wheels were turning now, and they would not stop. Admiral Thomas Evans arrived at FOB Sentinel 3 days later. No advance notice, no ceremony, just a Navy helicopter touching down in a cloud of dust and a 3-star admiral stepping out with a single aide carrying a locked briefcase. The base commander nearly had a heart attack. You don't get surprised visits from admirals, not unless something has gone very, very wrong. General Thorne was summoned to a classified briefing room. He arrived confident, smiling, ready to explain whatever administrative oversight had brought an admiral all this way. He'd handled audits before. This would be no different. Commander Calloway was already in the room when Thorne arrived. So was Master Chief Sharma. She stood near the back wall, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Thorne barely glanced at her. Admiral Evans did not waste time on pleasantries. "General Thorne," he began, his voice carrying the kind of weight that comes from decades of command, "I'm here to conduct an inquiry into Operation Serpent's Coil. Specifically, the intelligence that led to its success." Thorne straightened. "Of course, Admiral, I'd be happy to walk you through the operation. Alpha Company performed exceptionally. Their ground-level intelligence work was—" "General," the Admiral's voice cut through like a blade, "I'm not asking for your propaganda briefing. I'm asking for the truth." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Evans opened the briefcase, pulled out a tablet. "I've reviewed the official after-action report. I've also reviewed classified signals intelligence logs, and I've reviewed video footage from your recent awards ceremony. There are discrepancies. Thorne's confident smile faltered, just for a moment. Then it returned, more forced this time. Admiral, I'm not sure what discrepancies you're referring to. Everything in my report is accurate. Is it? Evans turned the tablet around. On the screen was a map, a dense urban area with dozens of buildings, hundreds of potential hiding places. Tell me, General, how exactly did Alpha Company identify the target location from all of this? Thorne cleared his throat. Aggressive patrolling, interviewing locals, traditional infantry work, boots on the ground intelligence gathering, the kind of thing we've done for generations. Traditional infantry work. Evans repeated the words slowly, testing them. In a city where every local was terrified of the insurgents, where no one would talk to American soldiers, where the enemy was using sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques, your infantrymen just found them. They're well-trained, Admiral. I don't doubt their training, General. I doubt your honesty. The room went silent. Admiral Evans turned to Master Chief Sharma. Master Chief, please explain how the target was actually located. This was the moment when everything could go wrong, when she could be labeled a troublemaker, a whistleblower, someone who broke the chain of command, someone who embarrassed a general officer. But she had not broken any rules. She had simply documented the truth. Sharma stepped forward. Her movements were controlled, economical. She approached a large display screen on the wall and accessed it with her credentials. The screen came to life, showing streams of data that looked like chaos to most people. But to her, it was a language, a story written in electromagnetic waves. Operation Serpent's Coil, she began, her voice quiet but clear, was designed to neutralize a high-value target known as the Ghost, an enemy commander who had evaded capture for 18 months. He used a sophisticated communication system, frequency-hopping encrypted radio transmissions, designed to mimic random atmospheric phenomena. Her fingers moved across the interface. The chaos on the screen began to resolve into patterns. Lines of light emerged from the darkness. No system is perfect, she continued. Every piece of hardware has a unique physical signature, a flaw in a crystal oscillator, a microsecond delay in a power amplifier. These create a recurring error, a digital fingerprint buried layers deep in the signal. The room was utterly silent. Even General Thorne had stopped smiling. I designed a polymorphic decryption algorithm, not for the content of the messages, for the carrier wave itself, searching for this repeating hardware latency, a digital heartbeat. A single thread of light pulsed on the screen, steady, rhythmic, impossibly faint against the background noise. It took my system 48 hours to isolate it. The thread of light solidified, leading to a single building in a crowded city block. I cross-referenced the signal's origin with thermal imaging from an RQ-170 Sentinel drone. The building showed a heat signature consistent with multiple occupants and significant electronic equipment in a sublevel. She zoomed in on the map, one building, one address, highlighted in red. I passed this specific location to Task Force Command at 2:41 Zulu. The assault force led by Major Davies was dispatched to that location. They met resistance, neutralized the targets, captured the Ghost. She turned from the screen to face Admiral Evans. They were sent to the objective, based solely on the intelligence I provided. The holographic display froze, the digital heartbeat still pulsing, the single building still highlighted. She had not raised her voice, had presented no opinions, had simply displayed the raw, unassailable data. She hadn't supported the raid. She had been its architect. She had pointed a finger through the digital fog and told the trigger pullers precisely where to go. General Thorne was pale. His entire narrative of heroic infantrymen finding the enemy through sheer grit had just been vaporized by a quiet woman and her invisible war. He had built his reputation on being a muddy-boots general, and he had just been shown, in front of an admiral, that he was strategically illiterate in the modern age. Admiral Evans looked at Thorne. His gaze was cold, unwavering, the look of a man who had seen through every excuse, every fabrication, every desperate attempt to save face. "General," he said, his voice like the deep sea, "your after-action report credits aggressive patrolling by Alpha Company for locating the target. That is not just an error. That is a fabrication. You have misrepresented a tactical operation to your superiors and to the public. You have also publicly humiliated a decorated senior non-commissioned officer and illegally confiscated her award." The admiral's words hung in the air like a death sentence. "This inquiry is concluded. My report to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will reflect these findings." For a four-star general, this was the end. His career was over, not with a bang, with documentation, with facts, with a quiet woman who had simply told the truth. Can respect be restored once it's been shattered? The next morning, the entire task force was assembled on the parade ground once more. The air was different. The heat and dust were the same, but the mood was somber, attentive. There was no media present. This was not for them. Admiral Evans stood at the podium. General Thorne was conspicuously absent, already on a transport back to Washington, already drafting his retirement papers. "In any large organization," the admiral began, his voice carrying across the silent ranks, "errors can be made. Good organizations have the integrity to identify those errors and the courage to correct them. We are here today to correct an error." He called her name. Master Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma. She walked forward, the same economical movements, the same perfect stillness. She halted before the admiral and saluted. Admiral Evans held the Bronze Star Medal. It was the same one from days before. He had made a point of retrieving it from General Thorne's possession personally, a small act of justice in a world that often had none. He did not read the citation again. Instead, he looked directly at Sharma. "Master Chief, on behalf of the United States Armed Forces, I apologize. Your skill and your dedication saved American lives and ensured the success of a critical mission. We are honored by your service." He leaned forward and carefully pinned the medal to her uniform, just above her service ribbons. Then he stepped back and rendered a slow, deliberate salute. For a moment, he held it alone. Then, from the front rank, a single Marine gunnery sergeant snapped his own hand up in a salute of razor-sharp precision. The sound of it seemed to break a spell. A wave of motion followed as every single soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine on that parade ground raised their hands in salute. Thousands of them, a thunderous, silent roar of respect. Master Chief Sharma stood at attention, receiving something far more valuable than any medal. She was receiving acknowledgement, not from politicians or generals or people who moved pieces on a map from comfortable offices, but from the men and women who stood in the dirt, who kicked in the doors, who pulled the triggers. They understood now. They understood that the war they fought was not the only war being fought, that there were invisible battlefields where other warriors hunted in darkness, where victories were measured in signals and shadows, where a single woman with a keyboard could be deadlier than an entire company with rifles. The salute held for what felt like an eternity. Then the admiral dropped his hand, and the wave of motion reversed as thousands of hands returned to sides. The ceremony ended. People dispersed, but something had changed. You could feel it in the way soldiers looked at her now, not with confusion or dismissal, but with curiosity, with respect, with the quiet acknowledgement that comes when you realize you've been standing next to a warrior and didn't even know it. Later that day, Sharma was on the long-distance rifle range, the place she went for solitude, The familiar weight of the .338 Lapua Magnum was a comfort in her hands. She was calculating windage and Coriolis drift for a 2,000-meter shot when a figure approached. Gunnery Sergeant Torres, a Marine Scout sniper, one of the best in his field. He stopped a few feet away, not speaking for a long moment. He simply watched her make her calculations, respecting her process. "Master Chief," he finally said. She turned her head slightly, acknowledging him. Torres reached up and removed a patch from his uniform's shoulder pocket. It was the iconic emblem of a United States Marine Corps scout sniper, a skull superimposed over a crosshair with the words, "One shot, one kill." It was a symbol of extreme proficiency, an insignia of a brotherhood earned through immense hardship and skill. He held it out to her. "The guys at the schoolhouse, we heard what you did, not the DFAC gossip, the real story, finding that needle in a haystack full of needles." He paused, his weathered face serious. "That was the finest piece of marksmanship I've ever seen." Sharma looked at the patch, then at the man. She understood the depth of the gesture. It was the highest form of professional respect he could offer, a sniper's acknowledgement of another sniper, even if her scope was made of algorithms instead of glass, even if her crosshairs were measured in hertz instead of mil-dots. She reached into her own pocket and retrieved a spare patch. It was a simple black circle. In the center was a stylized phoenix, its wings made of radio waves rising from flames. Below it, embroidered in silver thread, was the Latin motto of her unit: "Fides in tenebris," faith in darkness. She took his patch and handed him hers. No other words were needed. The exchange was a treaty of mutual respect between two masters of their respective crafts, two people who understood that precision, dedication, and skill existed in many forms, that you could pull a trigger from 2,000 meters away or from 20,000 miles away through a satellite uplink, and both required the same cold, unflinching excellence. Torres nodded, tucked the phoenix patch away carefully, and left her to her solitude. Sharma returned to her calculations. The wind was shifting, 3 knots from the southwest. Temperature was dropping as the sun descended toward the horizon. She made adjustments to her scope, steadied her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. 2,000 meters downrange, the target shattered. Perfect shot, perfect silence, perfect understanding that some battles are won before anyone even knows they're being fought. What defines a warrior in an age of invisible wars? The final scene of the drama unfolded back in the quiet, cool darkness of her workspace. The air hummed with the sound of fans and servers, a constant white noise that she found more soothing than silence. The holographic map of the next operational area floated before her, a new and complex problem waiting to be unraveled. Commander Calloway entered, walking softly. He stood beside her for a moment, watching the streams of data flow across the display like rivers of light in the darkness. "Master Chief," he began, his tone formal but now colored with a deep, newfound respect that hadn't been there before. "I just got off a secure video call with the Director of National Intelligence." He read Admiral Evans's report. He paused, let the weight of those words settle. "Your next assignment has been approved, Project Trident." Sharma's eyes remained on the map, but he saw a flicker of acknowledgement, just a slight change in the set of her shoulders. Project Trident was the bleeding edge, a program so classified that most of the intelligence community only knew it as a rumor, a ghost story told in secure facilities. "About what happened here," Calloway continued, feeling a need for closure that she probably didn't share. "With General Thorne, the ceremony, all of it. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Anna Sharma finally turned her head from the glowing tactical display. Her face was calm, illuminated by the shifting blue light of the hologram. There was no trace of vindication, no hint of triumph, no satisfaction at seeing a general brought low. There was only the quiet focus of a professional whose work was done and whose next task was already loading. Correction was achieved, she said simply. 3 words, that was all, because to her that's all it had been. Not revenge, not justice in any dramatic sense, simply a correction of the record, a realignment of fact and fiction. The system had a flaw. The flaw was documented. The system corrected itself. That was how it was supposed to work. Her gaze returned to the map, to the rivers of data, to the invisible battlefield where she hunted. Calloway watched her for a moment longer, then nodded and left. He was learning. They were all learning that there were different kinds of strength, different kinds of courage. Some warriors charge into gunfire. Some sit in dark rooms and hunt through electromagnetic noise. Both require the same steel core, the same absolute refusal to break, the same dedication to the mission above all else. In the hours that followed, Sharma began her analysis of the new operational area. It was in a different country, a different threat, but the principles were the same. Someone was out there transmitting. Someone thought they were safe behind their sophisticated encryption and their frequency-hopping protocols and their carefully randomized transmission schedules. They were wrong. She would find them. It might take days or weeks. It might require building new algorithms and new pattern recognition systems. It might require correlating data from a dozen different sensors across 3 continents. But she would find them. Because that's what she did. She was not the person who kicked in the door. She was the person who told them which door to kick. In the invisible world of signals and shadows, that made all the difference. The base outside continued its rhythms. Patrols going out, helicopters landing and taking off, soldiers training and eating and sleeping and preparing for the next mission. The visible war, the one that made headlines and filled after-action reports and generated medals and promotions. But here, in this cool dark room with its humming servers and glowing screens, another war was being fought. A war measured in microseconds and megahertz. A war where the enemy never knew they were being hunted until it was too late. A war where a small woman with perfect posture and unbreakable focus was one of the most dangerous weapons in the American arsenal. General Thorne would never understand that. He would retire to comfortable speaking engagements and consulting positions, telling stories about the good old days when warfare was simple and warriors were easy to identify, when you could tell who was fighting by looking at the mud on their boots. But the world had changed. Warfare had changed. And people like Anna Sharma were the reason that enemies who thought they were invisible, who thought they were safe in the digital fog, suddenly found themselves staring at American soldiers kicking in their door. She worked through the night. As the base slept, she hunted. The data streams flowed across her screens like constellations. Patterns emerged and dissolved and emerged again. She isolated anomalies, built probability models, tested hypotheses against reality, failed, adjusted, tried again. This was her battlefield. This was her fight, and she had never lost. Somewhere in the world, an enemy was transmitting, believing they were safe, believing their encryption was unbreakable, believing that American intelligence was still stuck in the 20th century, still relying on human intelligence and satellite photography and intercepted phone calls. They would learn, just as others had learned, that there was a new kind of warrior, a new kind of fight, and that the most dangerous person in the war might not be the one holding the rifle. Dawn came. The first light of morning touched the mountains around the base, painting them in shades of orange and gold. The day shift would be arriving soon, fresh faces ready to take over the watch, but Sharma had what she needed, the first thread, the first hint of a pattern in the noise. She documented her findings, encrypted the files, sent them up the chain of command. Then she saved her work, logged out, and stood. Her back was stiff from hours of sitting, but her mind was clear, sharp, already anticipating the next steps. She walked out of the workspace into the morning light. The air was cool. The dust had settled overnight. The base was waking up. Soldiers heading to breakfast. Mechanics starting their pre-flight checks. The ordinary machinery of war grinding into motion for another day. Master Chief Anna Sharma walked across the parade ground where, just days before, she had been publicly humiliated, where a general had taken her medal and dismissed her contribution, where cameras had captured her walking away in silence. The ground looked different now, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was exactly the same and only the people had changed. The way they looked at her, the way they stepped aside, the way Junior enlisted snapped to attention when she passed. Respect, she had learned, was not something you demanded. It was something you earned, not through speeches or displays of dominance or public humiliation of others, but through competence, through dedication, through doing your job with such absolute precision that even people who didn't understand what you did understood that you were essential. She reached her quarters, showered, changed into PT gear and went for her morning run. 5 miles at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, just consistent like everything else she did. By the time she returned, Project Trident was waiting. New orders, new challenges, new enemies who thought they were safe in the shadows. They would learn, as others had learned, that there was nowhere to hide from someone who spoke the language of the electromagnetic spectrum. Someone who could hear whispers in the thunder. Someone who could find a single thread of truth in an ocean of lies. The war continued. The invisible war. The war that most people never knew was being fought. And Master Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma, small and quiet and absolutely unbreakable, was one of its most formidable warriors. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not rage or revenge, but the patient, methodical documentation of truth. Because in a world built on systems and processes, truth has a way of finding the surface. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably. Like a signal emerging from noise. Like a heartbeat hidden in static. Like a warrior who fights in darkness and asks for nothing but the opportunity to serve. The sun rose higher. The temperature climbed. Another day in the war began, and somewhere in a dark room filled with glowing screens and humming servers, Anna Sharma returned to her hunt, silent, focused, unbreakable, exactly as she had always been, exactly as she would always be.